What's going on, Lions fans? Welcome to the Pride of Detroit YouTube channel. My name is Miko, joined once again by my guy Morgan Cannon, and this is the Pride of Detroit YouTube channel, your go-to place for all things Lions related. That includes news, updates, analysis, and so much more. Morgan, we are finally getting a chance to talk about some of the things that came out of the NFL owners meeting of this past couple days. A number of good things from both Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell. I always forget like how good it is to hear from these guys, because like we go long stretches, especially Brad. Like we only get to hear from Brad, end of the season, after the draft, like stuff like this. And then it's like after draft night, and then it's like we typically don't hear from him all that often, obviously during the regular season. So really, really good to kind of get to hear from both guys, especially coming off of like these last couple of weeks of free agency, right?
Yeah, no doubt. And it's refreshing to hear Brad talk because he's a lot of like Dan when he interacts with the media, right? Like he's not gonna sugarcoat a lot of things. He talked about some like difficult subjects like that we're gonna get to, like Broderick Martin, how expensive, some upcoming contracts are gonna be, and like his message to the fans. So yeah, similar to Dan, like some stuff they're gonna keep close to the vest, they're gonna because just they need to. But excuse me, for the most part, they're going to, give you the facts and answer questions to the best of their ability. So it's always good to hear from him. Just good relationship with the media. I think his last question with Jeremy at the very end, did you see when he's
Yeah,
like, thanks a lot,
Jeremy asked him. He's
rising
asking him
stars.
about any other like rising stars in the front office, and he's just like bro, try to keep some of that under wraps.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Jeremy. That was funny. So he's just, similar to Dan, gives you good information though when he does speak. But like you said, we don't hear from him as much. So whenever Brad speaks, I'm trying to tap all the way in because it's, like you said, not as often.
Yeah. Also similar to Dan, I noticed this last year. Brad's filling out a little bit. He's clearly hitting the gym, and with them being down in Florida, he's got the guns out a little bit. I'm just like that button up is a little tight around the arms, and them forearms are kind of popping there.
Yeah, bro. I bet you he's lifting and he's enjoying the Detroit food scene, as we all are. You know what I'm saying? It's just
Can't blame the man. There's a
gas.
lot of good food spots out here. But with that said, let's kind of jump into some of the talking points that we kind of wanted to discuss coming out of the owners meeting. But before we do that, I'm always kind of getting a little ahead of myself. If you are new to the Pride of Detroit channel, this is a great opportunity for you to help be able to hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. It's a good way for you to stay locked into any of the new content that we have kind of coming out on a weekly basis. We usually drop 2 videos a week. So if you want to stay locked into those videos and be notified when they drop, hit the notification bell. It'll help out immensely. It also notify you when Jeremy and the guys tend to do their live streams. I think it's like on Sunday night these days. So, it's a good way of kind of staying plugged into all of those things. Like I said earlier, let's get into some of the talking points to come out of this week's owners meetings. And one of the things that Brad, talked about, and I really kind of like tapped into when he was, talking about free agency and talking about what the Lions could or couldn't do, is the, kind of like the cost to get into the market when it came down to corner, and how like he really kind of pointed like just to get into the door with some of these corners, you're starting at 16 million, which made me kind of wonder, Morgan, do you think like how expensive the cornerback market was possibly deterred the Lions from what they were hoping to do in free agency this year?
I think it definitely hamstrung them more than they thought going into free agency. You know what I'm saying? Like he did say they were able to retain most of who they wanted to in terms of like Derek Barnes and Levi Onwuzurike and people like that. But they knew that they were going to need a corner. I think he talked about it. He was they still excited about Rakestraw, but just because he was hurt last year, they didn't really get a good chance to evaluate where he was going to be likely in the beginning of year 2. Dan said it too. He'll have an opportunity to compete. The best man's going to play, that's good because that's going to be a competitive room, in my opinion. So yeah, I do think that was expensive. I was, like I said in a couple videos, I was surprised at the DJ Reed deal. I was excited about it because it serves like a nice little 2-year, like he's a really good player,
Yeah.
Like I said, similar tier to Carlton Davis, in my opinion, as a corner. Different players, but similar tiers, if that helps. So yeah, I do think it shrunk the budget a little bit, and he talked about that, right, Miko? And then them basically budgeting for these upcoming deals, and he mentioned a bunch of names, but first and foremost, he mentioned Hutchinson. So they know that's coming down the pipe. Yeah. Do you remember too? They I forgot who asked it, but they were like, were you expecting the edge numbers, some of these contracts to
Yeah.
be this
some of the D
high.
line numbers. Yeah, because he was talking specifically about like again the value that they were able to retain Levi at, and he was kind of talking about like if if you had told him that he was going to be able to get Levi at what they got him at back when they first started negotiating with Levi, like he wouldn't have believed it, which kind of also gives you some insight into like what Levi's camp thought he was worth, whether it was, before the season or during the season based off of his production. Like they clearly had a larger number in mind for what Levi was worth, but for them to be able to get him at a pretty good cap friendly deal really, really shows just how, disciplined the Lions are in being able to hand out contracts, and a little fortunate in that regard. But I do agree with you as well. I do think this cornerback market really, shocked a lot of people. It definitely shocked me. Like when you start seeing guys getting like 18, 19 million, things like that, like it really kind of shocks you at the cornerback market. And then, like you said, you had D linemen that were getting paid. And so it quickly, you and I talked about it, like even in previewing free agency, like we didn't believe the Lions were going to be big spenders, but for you still to be able to get one of the top corners in the free agency market at a bargain deal in comparison to some of the others, like I said, it's a real sign of just, again, how well disciplined this front offense is.
Yeah, and they have to be. Like he talked about the Hutchinson deal, and they've been prepping for that number to be nice and high. They've had that budgeted. He kept using the analogy, like talking about his, your mortgage and the kids' college fund, and could you go on a nice vacation this summer? And well, no, not if you want to do these other things. You know what I mean? So I'm happy about that, man, because like we've talked about, it's the players they've evaluated, that they know about, that they're comfortable with in their system and with the organization. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm happy. I'd rather retain our own players than be these big spenders in free agency, man. Because the people who are retaining their own players and drafting well, those are the teams that are winning championships. And there's no argument to that.
Maybe the NFL needs like a Klarna system or something, like makes it easier to pay players without having to give such large lump sums up in one, chunk.
For
Something like
real.
that makes it a little bit more easy.
Hell yeah.
One other thing, though, that I thought was really interesting that Brad was talking about in his press conference, and it was a name that I just kind of didn't expect to come up when they were talking about the defensive line, was Josh Paschal. And you and I have talked about Paschal specifically this past season, and just like, man, like when are we going to start to kind of see him emerge as a pass rusher? And the thing that I thought was interesting is that when Brad Holmes was talking about Josh Paschal, he was more so talking about his impact as an interior pass rusher and not so much on the edge. Like he really kind of wanted to emphasize like that they think his value is rushing on the interior, specifically with like them getting Hutch back, that might offer that opportunity for Paschal to kick inside a little bit more. So just kind of curious, first and foremost, were you surprised to kind of hear Paschal talked about in that light as an interior pass rusher? And do you think this was always kind of like the vision for him? Like, do you think Lions fans probably just had it a little misconstrued when he was first drafted, that we immediately slotted him as an edge, when maybe he was always kind of meant to be like that attacking 3 tech?
Yeah, exactly, Miko. That's essentially what Brad said, but they just had so much attrition at edge, right? Like Paschal had to take a ton of his snaps out there. And I think that was just because of the situation. You know what I mean? Ideally, I do think he would take, the lion's share of his snaps at like the 3 tech, inside, just because with his frame, he's a powerful like athlete. Like he's good at setting the edge against a tackle, good against the run. But if you're asking him to consistently beat, like upper echelon tackles in the NFL on passing downs, that's going to be tough, especially quick wins. That's what you want, because those are the game changing plays, right? Like the strip sacks, the
Yeah.
sacks on 3rd and long. That's going to be more difficult for him to come by consistently working against tackles. Whereas if he's rushing from the interior on passing downs against guards and centers, well, now I feel good about that. Like that's a good situation. So I think that was always the plan, and it's just more depth, and the fact that he can kick out. Like if you do want to go heavy sets, like a 4 or 5 man front with him setting an edge at the 5 tech. So 3
Mm-hmm.
tech, if you think about it, guys, short explanation. 3 tech is the outside shoulder of the guard. 5 tech is the outside shoulder of the tackle. Right, so pretty simple.
Yeah.
7 outside shoulder, outside shoulder of the tight end, if he's there. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at, Miko. I think that's the ideal plan. And from there, like, I want to get your thoughts here, because this is kind of an easy one for me. Whose future in Detroit are you like most concerned about of these 3 players, like long-term future? Jameson Williams, Broderick Martin, or Hendon Hooker?
See, this is an interesting one because all three of these players came up during Brad Holmes' press conference, and he talked about all of them. And there's been a lot of speculation about all three in terms of their long term future. Obviously, we talked about JMO, I think, a couple weeks ago in terms of like whether or not he's worthy of a contract extension. Broderick Martin is someone who's been under the radar since the Lions drafted him and traded up to draft him. And then obviously, there's a lot of questions about Hendon Hooker with them bringing in Kyle Allen in free agency. But this to me is a layup. It's Broderick Martin by far, and I think Brad even hinted to that as much because yes, they expected him to be a project. Brad said that from day one when they drafted him, but the fact that we're now going into what year 3 and he's still not even cracking the active day roster is a problem. Like is a big problem, and if he can't find a way to become more consistent, like Brad even said, becoming more consistent with what he's doing and not just flashing in the preseason and not just flashing in training camp, he could find himself on the same type of train that James Houston found himself on when he was here in Detroit.
Yeah, and I love how you line those two questions up, to be honest, because if you think about Paschal more of as an interior rusher, think about how crowded that room is already, right? You got Paschal, Reader, right? Levi, Aleem when he's back, Makai Wingo, Roy Lopez. That's a deep room, man. And say they go draft like Darius Leonard at 28, Broderick Martin might not make it to like the second week of camp. Like it's going to be tough sledding because he basically Brad and that I'm paraphrasing here, but there's been flashes of good, but then some lows too. So with Broderick, and I always think of that one series. Remember Miko against the Packers when they put him in and just got absolutely blown off the football. And go ahead.
I was gonna say, like at that size, like that's a huge problem when you're expecting him to anchor, and again, not necessarily be like your starting, nose tackle, but like I said, if you can't even crack, the active day roster as just like depth on game day, and the Lions are going into the draft, and like you said, they go out there and they draft a Darius Alexander out of Toledo or Derek Harmon out of Oregon, like
I said Leonard, yeah. Good job.
Like you slowly start to find yourself in a situation where like Broderick Martin is very much on the outside looking in, and he's somebody that immediately becomes a cut candidate once training camp kicks off.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, thank you for the catch. The kid from Toledo, who I was referencing at 28, it's a crowded room, and they knew it was going to be a project. But yeah, I think if he doesn't show some like consistent development like early, he might have a chance. I mean, he'll probably get a chance to catch on somewhere else, but man, as depleted as the Lions roster was at the end of last year, I was bummed that like snaps were going to cats like Jonah Williams and Miles Adams. With respect, like Miles Adams, Pat O'Connor was playing nose, man. So that was disappointing because, like that would have been nice had Broderick been able to come in and play some legit snaps. Like we're not asking for 60 snaps like they were playing. Like they were playing Reader so much just because they had to. But I mean, Paschal too. Like there was multiple games where I know he saw 60 snaps a couple of times at least, and that's just too many, right, Miko?
It is, and I think that's one of the reasons why, like, whether you're listening to Dan talk about it or you were listening to Brad talk about it, like, both of them were asked pretty directly about like their confidence in their defensive line, and both again in lockstep with each other with their answers, but both of them have a great deal of confidence in this defensive line. And I don't know necessarily that the fans necessarily share that sentiment, but when you look at this defensive line, and I kind of feel like I know your answer based off of just like how we were just now talking about it, and based off some of the players you listed, do you share that same sentiment that you're this confident in the Lions defensive line, going into off-season workouts? Obviously, like the season is still a long ways away. Going into off-season workouts,
I am, because I know in the long term, 97 is going to be like just because I know it was a brutal injury, but like I don't see that being a hindrance. I want to see it. I want to see it on the field, but I think he's going to come back like a demon, like he was playing like last year. And then if you get a lean back at any point, like full, I think Dan said that, if you get full Aleem McNeil back at any point in 2025, that's just gravy, because I think they're going to invest heavily in this in a couple weeks, and it's going to look like a really deep room. But Yeah, I'm to circle all the way back. I'm Broderick Martin right there with you, just because. Yeah, it's a deep room, man. I know fans are like it feels like forever ago, but if you're feeling down, go back and watch that, like some of those early games. Like
Hmm.
maybe watch the Dallas game, skip the one where Hutch breaks his leg, but watch that one. They were whipping people, so just
Yeah.
trust them. I know it feels like forever ago. Sweta says this to me all the time. She's like, "No, I don't remember." I'm like, oh, my God,
But I think, like you said, like even just having you list off the depth at just defensive tackle, and the fact
yeah,
that you still could add talent to that room, like there's still so much flexibility. Because when you talk about Pascal and Levi, like both of those
kick
guys have
count.
the flexibility to be, yeah, 3 techs and 5 techs. You talk about DJ Reader as, okay, like that's your certified nose. Aleem will probably be back, like Dan said, probably in October is probably when they're like at least shooting to expect him to be back. Roy Lopez is someone that has been a bona fide starter like every year that he's been drafted. So you still have a lot of depth. And like you mentioned, Makai Wingo is someone that I think people forget was actually flashing, pretty
Before he
well
got hurt,
prior.
dang it.
Yeah, before he got hurt as well. And then yeah, like the edges is the area where there is a little more concern, right? Obviously getting Hutch back, and like Brad talked about, you're getting one of the elite guys at that position back. You're hoping that Marcus Davenport can at least stay healthy for 50% of the season. Like that's at least where I'm at. 50% of Marcus Davenport is probably better than what they had last year. And so if you can at least get him available for that portion of the season, and I don't think it's lost on the Lions that they need more edge depth, like specifically pass rushing depth. And so that's why, you and I have continued to stress this offseason. Like I do, and I could see them double dip into that position specifically for guys that can get after the quarterback. I know this is a team that typically likes guys that can do both, that can stop the run and get after the quarterback. I think you have enough of those guys that can stop the run. You need a few more guys that still fit what you want as far as a football team, character wise, culture wise, all that stuff. But you need dudes that you can at least roll out on third downs and be like, hey, go get the quarterback.
Yeah, man, I would love, like I said, the kid from Toledo, Darius Alexander. That'd be smooth with me. Michael Williams from Georgia. I know people are like the production's not there. He's a little stiff. Opposite Hutchinson, I'm right there with Davenport. Can finish the year healthy. Like be healthy in January for me, baby.
Yeah.
Be healthy then. I'll be lit. That's perfect. You can
And
miss
that's
some
what I'm
games in
saying.
November. That's fine. Whatever.
Yeah, and so I think that's where I'm with you at the same in the same place as far as being confident. Like what they have currently is fine for now, and we talked about this last week as well. They still have to go into the draft. They still have to add some talent, preferably early in the draft. If they can do that with what they have now, and they can stay healthy throughout camp, throughout most of the season, I'll at least feel good about the Lions' chances to become like that much more impactful on the defensive side of things. But saying that, we spent a lot of this podcast talking about the defense, and that's a lot of the questions, rightfully so, that obviously a lot of reporters had for both Brad and Dan. But there was some questions about the offensive line. And one thing that I thought was really interesting that Dan talked about when he was talking about the offensive line is like he brought up Giovanni Manu and the likelihood, or at least the thought of like, hey, what if we move him around from left tackle and start moving him more inside to guard? And even mentioned that they did a little bit of that, during the season when he was on the practice or like, yeah, at least on the scout team and things like that. The Lions have had a lot of success moving their defensive players around, right? When they moved Iffy from corner to safety, moving Derek Barnes from the Mike linebacker to more of the Sam linebacker role, like that's been successful. It hasn't been the same necessarily on the offensive line. They've done this with Colby Sorsdahl, and we haven't quite seen that really materialize in anything. They've done that with a couple of other offensive linemen. To you, is trying Giovanni Manu at guard a bad sign? Is it a bad omen in your opinion?
No, I'd actually, if they give him a legit shot and he like earns some reps, like on the second
Yeah.
team or for like, I think that's a good sign because he's so raw. You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
he's such a raw. Like they knew it was going to be a little bit. Apparently, like I mean, it was Hank Fraley and them. We're talking about like it was night and day from the beginning of the season to the end of the season. So that's a good thing for me. So yeah, if he can earn some reps, and I apologize to John Whitaker because when they took him, he was like, "Oh, could they play him at guard?" I was like, "Man, he's like 6'9" or whatever, he's 6'8." But you know
Yeah.
what? Mekhi Becton just turned in a really good season he's like 6'8", isn't he? Like he's
Yeah,
big, yeah. So and
he's a
he
big guy.
beat the crap out of people on at right guard next to Lane Johnson for Philly. So I'll eat my words. If yeah, I would love if Manu could you plug him in at right guard because he's going to be a masher. He's a huge human. Like seeing
Yeah,
him in person's crazy, and he can move. If he can clean up some stuff, and he can, because I think the long term projections still tackle, because he is that kind
sure.
of athlete. But while Decker's still here and a good player, like if he can find some value at right guard, shoot, man, that'd be really awesome. You have him and Mahogany rolling, yes,
Like I
please.
said, my dream for Giovanni Manu from the time that I saw some of his highlights was to have him play guard and to have him and Panay pulling on the right side and just clearing people out. Like you run a screen to the right and you just let both of those guys get upfield. It's a dream. It's a dream of mine. So like the idea of them moving Manu to guard, I do feel like he would probably be the first like project that they would have on the offensive line of trying that out that I think could actually succeed because I just think he has the athletic profile that they're looking for at guard. Yes, obviously the size is something that like they'd have to figure out because obviously most defensive tackles are not 6'9". So he's definitely going to have to figure out a way of how to deal with those smaller, defensive tackles. But he, like I said, he has the athleticism, he has the length. I also, again, I'm not an offensive line expert, so someone that is, feel free to correct me if I am wrong. But Morgan, I do kind of feel like guard is just a little bit easier to learn than tackle. And it's probably not as much pressure in terms, especially if you're talking about having to protect your quarterback's blind side. So if moving Manu to the inside is going to be best and the quickest way of possibly even getting him on the field, I'm all for it.
Yeah, no doubt. And Manu has the physical profile to just do whatever he wants if he can just get like even just some of the fundamentals together. So, and I trust Hank Fraley to get it there, man. So, yeah, I'm right there with you. If he can, they'd have to come up with some cool nickname because Panay's Samoan,
Mm-hmm.
and then Manu is Tongan, so like close to Samoa in that region where all those islands are. So we'd have to come up with
Yeah.
a cool nickname because that would be crazy. And he's number
Listen,
59. That'd be cool.
59 next to 58, like Manu, I need you to have an awesome offseason.
Let's
Like
go, bro. Let's go, Gio.
just kill it in camp, get the right guard spot, Mahogany kill it, get the
Left
left guard
guard.
spot,
Let's
and
roll.
just have like a nasty
Just mash people.
offensive line. Yeah.
Yes, please.
I'm all for it. So that's pretty much going to do it for us, guys. Though those were some of the biggest, talking points that we had coming out of this week's owners meetings. If there's anything that you guys had questions on or things that you heard, feel free to drop those in the comment section below. Let us know what you guys are thinking, and also just let us know some of your feedback to some of the questions we asked in this video and some of our points that we had. And like always, if you're looking for more additional Lions content, all you have to do is check out prideofdetroit.com. New articles are going up all the time. I said this last week and I'll say it again. I don't know how there's new articles going up because we are at a weird point in the season, but the guys are still finding stuff to write about. So definitely go show your support over on the website and also over here on the Pride of Detroit YouTube channel as well. All you have to do is hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. And like I said earlier, drop us a comment. Those things help out the channel a lot and it makes it that much easier for you guys to find our content in the near future. So with all that said, I'm Miko. He's Morgan. Thank you guys for taking the time to watch, and we'll catch you guys in the next one.